Welcome, everybody. I am so happy to be here. And well, let's start with thinking beyond the classroom and what skills do students need for the modern world with global perspectives, with Cambridge Global Perspectives. So I'd like to start the session today with a question. So what skills do you consider students need to learn to be prepared for the modern world? So if you can write down on the chat box what skills you think are necessary, that would be great to find out. So Bethan, are we getting some?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a few coming in. Fantastic. So we've got teamwork, absolutely. Research, collaboration, and communication. I think someone knows about global perspectives.
Yes, definitely.
We've got communication, research skills, teamwork, public speaking. That's an interesting one as well.
Great.
Digital literacies, critical thinking and collaboration. Wow, we've got so many that are coming in here. Communication, collaboration, lots.
Perfect. So great. So that gives us a good start. And as you see, this is precisely what our webinar is going to be about, right? So if you look at this, we're talking about some news around the world. And what is the world saying? The world is saying that it is demanding for much more of our students than just knowledge, than just content, than just experience. No, we're talking about these hard skills that students may learn in the classroom, right? And the skills that we train our students for. The world is going beyond this. And right now, as you were saying, the world is asking for competent communicators, right? And we're talking about leaders, we're talking about critical thinkers, creative people now, right? And people who are willing to make a difference to solve problems. And basically what we're talking about is soft skills that are transferable, right? And that can be applied in different settings. And regardless the subject that you're teaching, or whether you are working, you're studying, that is exactly what Cambridge Global Perspectives is all about. And that is where we, as Global Perspectives teachers, can also make a difference. So this precisely takes me to what the webinar is all about, right? We're going to start talking a little bit about these soft skills. And you mentioned lots of these, right? We can even think about organizational skills that are required by students nowadays. So let's go on. And this is what we're going to be talking about. So we're going to be talking about the structure of the program, the skills that are developed right through the program, and how they can be implemented in the classroom. I hope that I can give you some ideas as a Global Perspectives teacher myself, and we will also be touching on the roles that we as teachers have and how that it is changing compared to traditional classes. And I think one of the most important things is how we can encourage our students to become the leaders of the future, and how they can become change makers, how they can become thinkers, right? And it is also this webinar is also intended to show you how to use some of the resources, how you can adapt them to make them fit your own context. And hopefully I will be able to give you some examples, and I wish they're going to be useful to your classes. And well, here are some ideas. So welcome everybody, and I hope you enjoy this webinar. So let's start knowing a little bit more about you. So I know already that some of you do know a little bit about global perspectives, but we have a little poll here. So how many of you are currently teaching Cambridge Global Perspectives at primary, lower secondary level, IGCSE, or not teaching yet? So please put in your answers. And if you're teaching different programs, well, you can also mark them, and let's see how much we know about this. And anyway, the skills and that we will be talking about, you can adapt these skills to all the different grade levels, but we would have to make some changes, and but still they will be useful.
Brilliant. So we've got lots of answers coming in on the poll here. So I will just share them with you now, Anna Carolina. If there's any last minute ones, please do submit now, because I'm going to end the poll and launch the results. Fantastic. So here we go.
A lot of you are teaching primary level, lower secondary, some IGCSE teachers, perfect. And some of you are not currently teaching a global perspectives. Great, it doesn't matter, but these are skills that are transferable. So these are skills that you can apply in your classroom, whether you're teaching global perspectives or not. But for those of you who are, you will, I hope, you will at the end of the webinar, you will have some ideas and learn how to apply them and how to use them in the classroom. So great. So thank you very much. And as I said before, I hope this webinar is useful for everybody. Okay, so let's start. And let me go to the next slide. And here. So what is Cambridge Global Perspectives? So basically, it is a course that is intended to develop transferable skills, right? Skills that students can make use of in their classes in everyday life. And you can see that it is not content-based, but basically it is about developing the skills. And that is what we have to focus on. And if you can see on the screen, we're talking about research, analysis, collaboration, communication, evaluation, reflection. Those are the skills that the world is demanding for. And that is what we have to work on. And throughout the program, students will also explore a range of topics and issues. So here are some ideas. And the most important thing is what we as teachers can do to share or to help students explore these topics. So for example, if you're talking about sports and recreation, that's the global topic. And some issues that we can refer to are music and identity for young people. We can think about freedom of expression. For example, if we're talking about art in terms of recreation, we can think of talking about graffiti. Is graffiti art or is it vandalism? And you can generate some kind of discussion. You can get different perspectives, different ideas from people. When you're talking about sports, you can talk about gender, right? And you can talk about concussions, for example, and head injuries. And one of the most important things is make sure, try to use what is happening in the world. I remember when I was in class and we were going through, or we were watching, in those days, we were watching the Olympic Games. So some issues that were coming up regarding sports and sports specifically, we discussed in the classroom. Recently, with football matches in the United States, right? American football, there was some head injuries and some sports players that had suffered concussions. And so we made use of those current situations, and we talked about it in class. So take advantage of that, take advantage of what is happening in the world, and help students discuss about those things. Biodiversity and ecosystem loss. You can talk about climate change. Look what is happening around the world recently these days. Here in Colombia, particularly, it's been raining so much when it shouldn't be raining. And we talk about the wildfires. We talk about all those things that are happening in every single day, right? So make use of the current situation, make use of news and all that to get students to learn a little bit more about the world and to talk about real global issues. In terms of digital world, privacy, data collection, manipulation, and algorithms, our students, if you're teaching a lower secondary or even IGCSE, we talk about how the media and how the internet is probably influencing us to make decisions And so I basically insist that you use current events and resources to promote interesting discussions in your classroom and motivate students to continue exploring the different issues and developing skills. So that is basically what we have to do. So here, some more information about Cambridge Global Perspectives is that it's a cross-curricular, it's demanding for us as teachers to develop some cross-curricular work, that we as teachers create those bonds with other teachers, that we can foster a communication with other teachers, and that students are able to transfer skills, right? And that they can use them in other classes. You can create bonds with science teachers, with the ICT teachers, and all the teachers in at your school. Those are the ones that you can work with. So no matter the issue, there is always room for us to develop skills, and especially to enhance or ensure that there is progressive learning. So that is what we have. The Global Perspectives program also includes some challenges, and that creates those points of discussion. So here, before we start working on the skills, I would like to know how you are developing those skills. And if you're teaching the subject right now, and for those of you who have not implemented the subject yet, how do you think these skills can be developed in the classroom? So let's wait and let's see if we have some ideas here.
Super. So we've got some answers coming in here. So it's by giving them opportunities with group activities and discussions.
Definitely. Yes.
Individual and group activities.
Mhm.
Debate. Yeah.
Perfect.
Interviews, presentations, discussions.
Great. Great.
Questioning everything all the time as well.
Yes. Yes, and I love that. And that is one of the most important things that we as Cambridge Global Perspectives teachers should be doing, questioning, because that also changes a little bit our role as teachers. Remember that now we are not the owners of knowledge. We are encouraging students to create knowledge. So questioning is definitely one of the most important things that we should be able to do in our classes. So thank you, Bethan, and thank you all for your answers. And let's go on. So what can we do to start a Cambridge Global Perspectives class? So one of the things that we can do is, if we're starting a class, we want to create those discussion moments that, as you were mentioning just a minute ago. So let's provide them with an image. You can show an image, you can show a video, right? To create some context. Ask questions, definitely ask questions, so that you can get students to participate. You can get them to start thinking about different perspectives. You can get them to start talking or maybe working in groups, developing mind maps. And this is another important skill, to get students to take notes, to write down their ideas, right? Note taking is absolutely important, because that is the information that they're going to be using later. And we also have to encourage students to write. The other thing that we can do in our class is to help students develop research questions with all these ideas, and through group work, as you mentioned before, pair work, discussions, right? Even debates. We can get our students to do all these things. And if you notice, if we start a Global Perspectives class this way, what are we doing? In the end, we're asking our students to develop skills. What kind of skills? Communication, analysis, collaboration, evaluation. That is what we're doing from the very start. So that is the beauty of the program, and that is precisely what we can do. Here is an example. And this is if talking about fast fashion, we can show an image here, some garbage and some clothing around. We can have some questions displayed for students to talk about. Maybe they can do it in pairs, maybe they can do it in groups, right? But have students talk about this, have them express what they know about the topic, and maybe even ask them to share a little bit about their personal choices. And as you mentioned before, having students work in pairs or in smaller groups, eh, that also allows for shyer students to be willing to participate more. And that's what we need. We need everybody to be able to communicate their ideas. And then we can move on to a whole class discussion, right? Create these debates, but we're encouraging students from the very beginning to use arguments and not just to state their claims, but we're getting them to be critical thinkers. So another idea that we can use is, for example, using infographics. So instead of using an image, we can give them this kind of information. And of course, this could be adapted for the higher levels, but we can have students analyze the information and they will also start thinking about perspectives. They can also start drawing conclusions. They can start forming their own opinions. So what is their perspective on the issue, right? Sometimes I even use cartoons, and you know that through cartoons, you can get some critical views on issues, and definitely you are promoting analysis of sources, and you are getting students to think, to be aware of what the information and what the world is saying about the different issues. So after the discussion, what I tend to have my students think about is perspectives. What perspectives and what perspectives can or who can have different perspectives from this issue. And then they can create some mind maps, right? And they can include some information regarding about what these issues may think about, or what these perspectives can think about the issue. And they can start creating possible research questions. This is where they start thinking about this information. They will need to probably evaluate those research questions because they might have several, and then they can make a decision and decide which one to focus on. But this is the very beginning, and this is how we get students started in the program. So a little bit about the teacher's role. So while students are working and while students are sharing ideas, our role as educators also changes. And we are, again, not the person who owns the knowledge, but we become more those facilitators. And we are the ones that are helping the students think, make decisions, research, find ideas. We are now becoming facilitators. We are helping them draw conclusions. So our role as teachers is basically to guide, to support students, to monitor them, right? And to provide feedback and guide them in their reflective process. And as you said before, one of the most important things is definitely questioning. Guide students in that process. Help them reflect on the skills and what went right, what went wrong, and help them think of ideas and come up with some solutions to the issues probably they had in terms of teamwork, in terms of research, what was happening in their group. So they can start thinking about that. So our role becomes very important, but we have to be there, monitor and helping students, guiding them. So let's move on and let's go and let's start with the skills that we're going to help students develop. So let's talk about research. So when conducting research, we also have to help students learn of different possible sources of information. And I think that one of the most important things is we have to get them go beyond the internet. So the only source of information is not necessarily the internet. We have to get them thinking of other sources of information. So again, and this is an example of research and how we start with some images, we get students to discuss some ideas, we have them analyze perspectives, and then we have them think, where can you get that information from? So it's not necessarily from the internet, because they can think of getting information from their teachers, from their parents, from school nurses, probably. And as somebody mentioned before, interviews, questionnaires, get them to think about these sources of information that are going beyond the just using what is online. So that's what we have to think about. And here is just a little example of what they can do. I don't know if you have ever thought about social experiments. So here is just a little video to show you an idea. This was a social experiment that was conducted, and somebody just drew hopscotch on the floor in the middle of the street, and they decided to see how many played, how many people in the street decided to play. So this is an opportunity to research. So they can think of these kind of ideas. It's not only in books, it's not only in the newspaper. You can find different information, and they can record the information, have data, tally the information, and draw conclusions from that. So that is what we're trying to encourage our students to do. So then we'll move on to, for example, they've been using sources. So let's get them to evaluate these sources. So what happens with these sources afterwards? Again, create different opportunities. Remember that we are not the owners of knowledge. So why don't we do some flipped classroom in some flipped classes? So what we can do is, for example, provide them a text with a evaluation of sources, and then have students sit in groups and discuss, how do we evaluate sources? What is necessary? What are some of the questions that I need to ask myself so that I can evaluate the source, right? And they may come up with some ideas. For example, they can think of these kind of questions. Who wrote the source? Where was the source published? When was it published? What is the author's expertise? What perspective is presented? Is there enough evidence to support this perspective? But this is something that students may come up with. But we as teachers guide them in the process if they haven't been able to identify these questions. So let's give them some ideas. Let's guide them. Let's ask them questions so they can start thinking and going beyond. Now, if we're talking about communication and collaboration, again, as somebody mentioned before, we can do some individual kind of work. We can do pair work. We can do group work. We can find different ways of getting students to communicate. And most importantly, through the process, again, we must be guiding our students, questioning them, verifying that students understand, verifying that they have clarity, that they know what is going on in the classroom. And we can create these moments of communication and collaboration through debates that you were mentioning. Definitely, that is a great moment to get them to discuss. We can also have class plenaries, reflective plenaries at the end. And what we can do is go beyond this. And as we said at the beginning, get students to communicate with other people, with peers, with parents themselves, with experts within the school community, and with experts beyond the school community. But the most important thing is also to make sure that we're creating a safe environment for students to communicate. We have to be aware of that, right? They can also think of, for example, experts, probably people in local stores, farmers, but always safeguarding our students. And I think that is the one thing that I always try to think of when creating these moments of communication and collaboration. And try to create bonds with schools. And if you do that, you're creating this safe space for students to communicate probably with people from other countries. And that is what we have to do, right? Then moving on, um, this is an example of something my students in IGCSE were doing. They were working on their team project, and they were not afraid to talk. And as you see, and of course, they were talking to some people in the United States. They were talking to students in Pakistan. They were talking to experts, a doctor, right? They were talking to people in Egypt. And from here in Colombia, for them, that was like, wow, this is global perspectives. This is what the program is all about, to understand what people around the world is thinking about an issue. So this is what we need to create. But again, and I insist, making sure that we're creating a safe space for them to collaborate and to think of this. So now we move on into creative thinking and problem solving. So this is the moment. And for me, this is one of the most important phases of the program as well, because we're getting students to find solutions to issues, find solutions to problems that are local and, of course, global, but it is also getting them to think of what they can do, how they can take action to improve or to make a difference. And we are definitely fostering some creative thinking skills. We are asking them to make connections, to think of the causes, the consequences of the issue, to analyze how they can use that information to find a solution, right? And to diminish the impact that these problems have in their local communities, maybe. And most importantly, is what they can do. And this is the moment when we start empowering our students. But how do we create those solutions? And as a global perspectives teacher myself, we always have to make sure that students think of having SMART goals. And we're going to talk about these SMART goals little by little. And so I can tell you what happens, how we have to do it in the classroom, and some ideas that we can use. So let's move to SMART. So first of all, ideas that they can use and how they can think out of the box, and they can and how we can empower students. They can start thinking about creating songs. Maybe they can write a speech and uh, just communicate their speech and talk to the whole school community. They can create videos. They can even go to different classes and teach. They can create some kind of events where they get other students to donate to help solve their problem. So this is the moment, and we as global perspective teachers empower our students. I, for example, have had some great moments when my students have been working on IGCSE team projects. And for example, there was a moment where my students decided to create this event because they were talking about education, and they got all the school community to donate notebooks, or notebooks that hadn't been completely used. So they took the pages that were not used, they put notebooks together, and they were creating these new notebooks, and they were donating them to students in schools where probably they didn't have these resources. in our local community. So this is the way that they can do things, and they can really make an impact. And I think one of the most gratifying things of all of this is for students to know that through these small actions, they can really make the world a better place. And this is where we can do that. We can empower our students, get them to think that they can do something good for someone, and for them, it's a wonderful experience, and definitely they will feel empowered. In thinking about this, I would also like to share a moment of a gratifying experience for me as a global perspectives teacher, and it was when after working on this team project for global perspectives, I even had one of my students decide uh, on becoming a community leader. And she was 16 years old, and she decided to make the difference in her local community. And this is the beauty of the program. And this is what the program does for you and for your students. So let's go on. And so what kind of goals are we thinking of? We're thinking of specific goals. Make sure that they're aiming at solving a specific problem within a local context. Make sure that they know what that problem is. And most importantly, think of making that a issue or the solution that they're creating something measurable. Students should be able to evaluate that outcome. Students have to decide or analyze whether their aim was achieved or not. And they have to, since they have to do it, they would have to make sure that it is a measurable outcome. Here is an example again. I'm using some examples from my students, and they decided to conduct a social experiment. And so they were talking about stereotyping. So they interviewed a group of people, and they showed them some pictures of some people. And here are some of the images of their work. And they were finding out what people thought, how accurate they were in determining the hobbies of these people. And some of them, they figured out how people just have these stereotypes, right? And they think just because of the look, somebody's look or somebody's image, they would just think of this person as this or that. But it was something measurable. It's something specific. They had a specific goal, and they were able to tally, and they were conducting research themselves. So you see, this is how we are applying all the information that we're using from before. They can find different sources of information. Another thing is, think of having goals that are attainable, that they are realistic. And students should not think of solutions that are costly or maybe depend on the intervention of others for the aim to be achieved. Instead, they should find and think about creative solutions that they themselves can carry out. So, for example, in my case, some of my students, if they're talking about education, and they were thinking about how students in Colombia and in some schools, they were not getting equal opportunities, for example, to learn a second language, such as English. So what they decided to do was to take action themselves, and they volunteered to work at a local school, and they were giving some of their time, and they were teaching English classes. So this was something that they could do. They were making an impact, and they were able to create that moment to really find a solution to the problem. Make sure also that the solution or that what you're trying to get students to do is also relevant, that you are making a difference, that it does matter. So as I was telling you before, my students working in terms of education, they really wanted to make a difference, and for them it was also a moment of satisfaction when they felt like I can do something good for somebody else, and they were making a difference. They were impacting somebody else. And something important is that don't forget to make sure that students document all this information, that they all team members work, that all team members aim at making this difference, and that they create an impact, that they do make an impact on society. So I think that's one of the most important moments. Finally, thinking about the SMART goals is about being realistic about the time they have available to achieve this goal. And sometimes we have to get students to think about their realities. If they're involved in sports, they're involved in different kinds of activities. So make sure that they know how much time they can devote to this activity, to making this change. So one of the most important things, and something that I have found eh, as a good resource, is to have some planning charts where students start thinking about what is my goal, what is my issue, and how much time would I need to complete or to achieve this goal, but also to start thinking about every single class hour. What is everyone going to be doing, and how much time would they need to do these activities? Here, another important thing is to start thinking about the roles each student has. Think about the skills, think about their strengths. This is the moment when they start thinking about that. What are their strengths? What are their individual weaknesses? And then assign roles to different students. They can think of having a team leader. Maybe they can have in at lower levels, they can think of having this person who gathers all the material needed. They can think of having an editor. Think of different roles that they can have. But again, something important is also think about individual skills. And this is where they can start making decisions. So it's a moment to allow them to evaluate what each member is going to bring to the classroom, or to the group, and how they can use those skills to create something even more powerful. So that is where we start them getting students to make decisions. And to complete the skills, one something important that we have to do is create these moments of reflection. And I think that we should not only leave reflections for the last minute, but get them to reflect at different moments, at different stages of the class, and guide students through questioning, right? Foster metacognition, encourage students to keep a journal, and that way we're also promoting some writing skills. So that is what we need to do, and create those moments of reflection where they start thinking, as we say, okay, who can do a better job at this? Why? What was happening when we were discussing? Did everybody participate? Why or why not? Am I a good listener? Am I paying attention? We can create those moments in the class. And that is precisely what we need to be doing. And we need to be creating these opportunities for students to talk, for students to communicate, for students to make decisions. And these reflections are the moments of growth. And this is where they can start thinking about what I can do better next time. what can I do to improve? And they as individuals can also reflect on what they have learned about the issue, what they have learned about themselves as individuals, right? And how they are using all these skills to make a difference, probably, and how are they using these skills also in other classes. So basically, this is what I wanted to share with everybody. And with all of these things that we have spoken about, I think, and we can go back to our initial question, and it is about how Cambridge Global Perspectives is definitely preparing our students for the future. And here's a little quote that I wanted to share from a career expert in LinkedIn. And it is about hard skills can help you get a recruiter's attention, but soft skills can help you land the job. And soft skills are the skills, of course, a combination of both, but soft skills are the ones that we can think of students taking to further education if they're moving on to university level, if they're going on to work. We don't know about the jobs of the future. Students don't know what the world is going to prepare for them. So if we give them the chance to develop these skills, we are definitely preparing our students for the future.
Well, and thank you so much again, Anna Carolina, for that brilliant webinar. I know there's so many ideas for the teachers online today to take from that. But just before we move on to sort of the question and answer session, if you are interested in seeing any of our Collins resources about the Cambridge Global Perspectives, whether IGCSE, primary, lower secondary, please do scan the QR code that's on the screen now. And we've got a few that have come in already, so I'll start now, and if anyone else has any other questions, then please do submit them in the Q&A box. And we've got the first one here to say that I am a current teacher of Global Perspectives in an online school to students across the globe. Mm-hmm. How do I include these aspects online, or any ideas how to do these online, in particular how to support collaboration?
Well, great. And that's a wonderful question. And thank you for asking. Of course, I had the same situation, of course, during the pandemic and all these things. And for collaboration, I think it's a good moment to use the tools that we have. Probably, well, it depends on what tools you are working with. You can think of Zoom, you can think of, well, Teams, whatever option you have available. But something important that I used to do was to create these rooms where these rooms where you can get groups to work together. One moment, for example, something that I used to do was also to get students to record their conversations, where that way I was also able to monitor and guide these discussions, and that you can also move from one room to another, and you can also participate, listen to what students are doing. So we can still create these moments of collaboration where they work together, where they have these discussions, where they all bring ideas. Maybe they're researching on their own, but if you get them to work in groups. But most importantly, and one of the things that I try to do and encourage my students to do was always have cameras on, so that they know that they're talking to real people, and that they are looking at each other, even if they're at a distance, but still get them to do that. But make sure that you, as an educator, you can move from one group to another, and that you can still monitor, you can still guide, you can still give feedback, you can still help students in the process. But that is the way that you can still do some collaborative work and foster communication, even if you are online.
Fantastic, some brilliant ideas there, and some real life examples there, which is fantastic to hear as
yes,
well, Carolina. Brilliant. So the next question we have, so it's again around the collaboration theme. So we've got collaboration becomes a difficult task to implement in the classroom. So again, I guess it's just welcoming some insights into how you overcome it. So there's been sort of the ideas of how you can do it that Anna Carolina's just said there as well. So I think maybe implementing those ideas and then sort of breaking down that barrier there. But have you had any students that have been quite reluctant to get involved in tasks, or anything that you feel would maybe motivate students to show these skills, Anna Carolina?
Yes, sometimes that, yes, it definitely happens. And to get students to collaborate, it could be a little bit difficult, but I think that one of the things that we should try to do is show students or make them aware, I would say, about their own strengths, probably. Encourage them to think about this. What can you, or what are you as an individual bringing to the classroom? You know your students, so you can think of, oh, you're good at this. So why don't you help this group do this or participate in this way? Try to motivate students in that sense, I would say. But another thing that I do, and especially for collaboration, sometimes students don't feel motivated to work in groups, probably because they're working with people that they don't know. But it's also, for me, something that works is having students change groups constantly so that they don't feel comfortable just working with friends, but get them out of their comfort zones sometimes, because they can find their strengths in that way. I can tell you from experience, for example, I had a student who always thought of himself of a follower. If you think about roles, he was not a leader. He was never considered a leader. He was always a follower, and he was just waiting for people to tell him what to do. But at one point, when he was in a different group where almost all of the students were at the same level, this student was able to shine, and he became the leader. And that was a conversation, that was a beautiful conversation I had with him at that moment, when I said, and I said his name, and I said, oh, look at all the strengths that you have, and you never thought that you could do this, but look at all the difference you can make in a group. And so this empowered my student, and this made him think like, oh, I never thought of me, or I never thought I could be a leader of a group. And everybody, and the most beautiful thing, for me, that was the most gratifying moment, was that his partners, all of them, were saying, he's a great leader. He knows how to do this. And so that's what we have to do. Find the strength, give them opportunities to work in different groups so that they don't feel that comfortable, I would say. And that helps them become more collaborative in different situations. And that also shows them that they can provide some good ideas, and they can do something good in different settings, I would say.
Absolutely. And it's so important that, that the understanding of students, and it can be sort of difficult from a young age to understand that actual change and your impact can have impact on others and the world around you as well, and taking that change into your hands. So having global perspectives, the course to help develop those skills is really important for a lot of students. Yeah,
exactly. And that, what I was telling you about this student, is something that he was going to take for the future, and he would now believe more in himself, and he could say, okay, now I have this to take to other groups. So that is what we have to show them.